We're doing the outside edition for Lori of Purposely Unplugged. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and it's so nice that we have the weather. I can be outside. Dave, for 2 weeks, I've seen clients outside. I have 5 different locations, so a client can choose where they want to be.
In the woods is perfect. You know what? Ever since you told me about this a couple of years ago when you started it, I've just been like, man, I get it. That's the place to be. Is outdoors, phone gone. Just enjoy it, sit back, and have a conversation.
And that's what we do here. So it's nice to do this, and it's a blessing to be able to operate the way that I do.
Let's just do a really quick update on what it is you do and why you're doing it in the woods.
Mhm. I'm a psychotherapist, but we also have a farm. So through this session, you may hear cows, you may hear roosters, you may hear all kinds of things. And through my master's, I really realized that there's one cow that I connected with well, and she is now a therapy cow. So clients interact with her after we've kind of done some calming and learned some breathing strategies. Then a client is welcome to go in the pasture with her, pet her, brush her, hug her, and this is something called cow cuddling, Dave, which really started in the Netherlands. So it's really not popular here. So it is unusual, and I'm doing something very unusual. And yes, I operate off grid, no water, no Wi Fi, no hydro.
It's folks, you gotta, if you're struggling with something, talk to Lori, because that's the type of environment you want to be put in to have, like I said, these conversations. I've got a tough question for you today. um, can you define for me emotional trauma? I hear that word a lot lately. I'm not sure what the parameters are or what it exactly means, so I'm asking you to take a moment and just walk us through this, will you?
Trauma is any lasting emotional response that can affect your sense of self, your sense of safety, your ability to regulate your emotions, your ability to manage relationships on a long term basis. And often, Dave, the emotion it's rooted in is shame, helplessness, powerlessness, fear.
That's pretty much every aspect of your life.
It can be.
Wow. I mean, emotional trauma can come in so many different forms too, correct?
Absolutely. So even when we think of abuse itself, that can be emotional, physical, sexual, financial, neglect, elder abuse. There's so many kinds of abuse that people have lived with. There's lots of attachment trauma from relationships or from relationships not fulfilling a need and leaving that gap through an emotional trauma from attachment. But this could also be bullying, discrimination, domestic violence, family violence. And when we think about that, we have to think too about vicarious observation, meaning the person who's observing the violence can be just as traumatized as the person who experienced the actual violent attack.
And it could be as simple. Now, I don't want to use the word simple because it's all complicated, but a car accident, right? Anything that affects your life, like you had said, anything that sort of affects you that way and has that lasting linger. And you and I've talked about this before, and the emotional trauma, when people try to cope with it or understand it, and I mean, we're talking to males who probably just bury it. Like I'm not, I'm probably a perfect example of that. But I mean, what? And then you see the drugs and the alcohol and all that other stuff. So in your field, when someone comes to you and they're trying to figure out, maybe they don't even recognize emotional trauma, do they?
Sometimes they don't, because sometimes in our life, it's when our emotion becomes too much, we become overwhelmed, or when our emotion is not enough and we're numb and kind of disconnected or detached. So often, Dave, I just have common conversations, relaxing conversations. And if there's something that's happening today, then I do ask the question, so when's the first time you felt that? Where do you think that might have come from? And just leave it an open question. And often clients can say, when I was 5, this happened. When I was 12, this happened. And, I've never talked about it. I didn't think it was a big deal. And I just simply say, well, let's talk about it a bit, see where we land on that. So if it is a situation where it is addiction of some kind, you kind of mentioned that, go to the root. We will slow it down and ask some questions about that and work through that trauma potentially first, and then work through the addiction later.
So when it with the emotional trauma, let's say an incident occurred 50 years ago, all right, and you've buried it, buried it, buried it. When you bury it with those layers, it seems like it becomes less significant. but the root of the problem, does it still, is that what drives you crazy? Is that what, crazy is not the right word, sorry. Is that what drives you, that keeps that inner turmoil going, I guess?
Well, the way clients often tell me and the way we talk about it is they'll have an intrusive thought. They'll have an intrusive thought now, a year ago, 6 months ago. Every once in a while, these thoughts just crop up. But when those thoughts crop up, they often have a body response. Like they want to get sick, or they get a headache, or get a migraine, or their legs hurt, or their knees hurt. So, really, part of our process is slowing it down and connecting that body response to that thought. Because the world doesn't tell us to do that, Dave. The world tells us to move faster, solve problems, bury it, don't talk about it. And you mentioned men. So often men aren't inclined to talk about some of these things. But we are now of a generation where let's start that conversation.
Can you can you define? I mean, you did right there, but a little finer. What is an intrusive thought?
Hmm.
Is it a flashback? Is it something that relates to a situation?
It can be lots of things. It could be a nightmare. It could be a body response. Every time you think about something, your stomach, you feel like you're going to vomit, something like that. So it can be a body response. It could be a nightmare. It can just be a thought. As we're going on a long drive on a Saturday afternoon, all of a sudden our thoughts start to
Right,
kind of delve towards this. And we often stop and think, why am I thinking about that? I haven't thought about that in 5 years. Like, I wish I could stop thinking about that and get rid of that thought.
right. Okay, I understand that now. That makes sense. So you're kind of building it out that way. That's, maybe it's the checkpoint saying, "Hey, you need to deal with this," right? It's an indicator that perhaps something still is there that you need to address. Um, you know, one more on emotional trauma. One of the things too is, how do you decide, or how do people decide? I guess it depends on the individual. What is emotional trauma? Like, uh, you know, I broke a nail. Oh my goodness, I've been saving that nail for 20 years. Like, I mean, is it, the spectrum must be crazy on that, is it?
The spectrum is, and it really depends on our coping skills and the strategy in the moment. So something that may not have bothered you before is now bothering you. So the way you might see that, are you crying more than normal? Are you on edge more than normal? Are you irritable more than normal? Are you struggling with getting out of bed in the morning? Are the things that you used to like to do just not on the top of your list anymore? If you're noticing those kinds of life shifts, that might be a time to kind of come and have some conversations. It might be trauma based, it might not. And if it is trauma based, then we just take the time to just talk about it with safety and just kind of develop what might look better as a solution for your life. So it could be a one time event, it could be a lifetime of events. It
What,
depends on the person.
okay, and what did you mean by safety? You said,
Oh, well, Dave, when we've carried these kinds of things in the back of our mind for a long time, we built strategies around not thinking about them. Meaning we distract, we play video games, we scroll on our phone, we watch TV, we do all kinds of things to distract our brain from thinking about it because we really don't want to. So when I mean safety, I just mean that as long as a client has lived with something, they have developed coping strategies to keep it locked up, buried away, deep, very deeply, whatever you want to say. So we safely talk about that. We never just get right in, dig right in, and push. That's not safe. So when I say safety, I mean a client has safety with me, and we build that together before we would ever really start working some of these big traumatic thoughts.
it's funny. I like the way you worded that, because I think on the other side of this, when you build, like you said, those habits that sort of help control, or you know uh, uh, distract you from the situation, when you're able to cope with all those, with that situation, those things that you do, I said do, those things you do, that makes it, you can go back to those and enjoy those with the right passion, correct?
Absolutely. And it's not just things. This might be overeating. This might be our impulse to drink. This might be our impulse to act inappropriate sexually. There's lots of things that we might live with and do today that once we talk about some of the things underneath that, those needs aren't there. The drive isn't there. And the things that we stop doing, we might start liking to do again.
Wow, great show today. I really appreciate you taking the time, coming to me all the way from the woods and hanging out. And folks, call Lori. Like, we're going to leave, the number will be below you on the screen. just even have the conversation. I think that's the hard part for a lot of people too, is that first initial step. But you and I've talked about this too. Again, just call and ask a question, right? You're there. That's what you're there for. You want to help, and go visit Lori, go out in nature, hang out with cows and chat, man. What's wrong with that? Nothing. What a great day to do it too. Nice sunny day.
It's beautiful. You had snow today. We didn't, but it is
Well,
beautiful here.
yeah, it was early in the morning. Anyway, how do people get a hold of you quickly before I let you go? And let them know.
Telephone is always best. Text is always easy. 226-934-7425.
Hey, enjoy the woods today. Talk to you soon.
Take care.